3 months passed on Valari Prime. Commander Lisa Grant and her team worked every day from sunrise to sunset, teaching the gentle Valari things they had never imagined learning. How to hide in shadows, how to set traps, how to strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could respond. It was not easy. The Valari had spent their entire history avoiding conflict. The idea of hurting another living being made many of them physically sick. But the memory of burned colonies and dead families was stronger than their discomfort. Slowly, carefully, they learned. Sergeant Danny Cole was one of the human advisors. He was a large man with kind eyes and rough hands, and he had spent 20 years fighting in difficult places on Earth. He had seen things that still gave him nightmares. But he had also learned that the best way to protect innocent people was to teach them how to protect themselves. The Kreth expect you to be helpless, he told his Valari students. They expect you to run and hide while they take whatever they want. We are going to surprise them. He showed them how to make simple weapons from farming tools. He taught them how to move silently through their own cities. He explained the importance of communication and coordination. Most importantly, he taught them that they did not need to be stronger than the Kreth to beat them. They just needed to be smarter. Meanwhile, Lisa was working on the bigger picture. She studied everything she could find about Kreth military tactics. She learned that they were rigid and predictable. They followed strict rules about how battles should be fought. They expected their enemies to line up and fight them directly, and they had become very good at winning those kinds of fights. But Lisa had no intention of fighting them directly. We cannot beat them with strength, she explained to Ambassador Zelthan. So we will beat them with confusion. We will make them fight a war they do not understand. The Kreth attack came on a quiet morning in early spring. General Vortish commanded the fleet, 80 ships carrying thousands of warriors. He had conquered a dozen worlds and had never lost a battle. He expected this mission to be easy. The landing parties touched down near a large agricultural facility. Intelligence reports said the building was abandoned. The Valari always fled when the Kreth came. It was what they did. Vortish ordered his troops forward. They marched in perfect formation, weapons ready, exactly as they had been trained. The facility was quiet. The doors were open. Everything seemed normal. The first explosion caught them completely by surprise that it came from beneath the ground, throwing soldiers into the air and breaking their neat formation into chaos. Before anyone could react, a second explosion went off, then a third. Smoke filled the air. Soldiers screamed and ran in all directions. Danny Cole watched from a hidden position on a nearby hill. He had buried those explosives himself, using techniques that humans had developed over centuries of warfare. The Kreth had never encountered anything like it. First phase complete, he reported through his communicator. They are confused and scattered. Beginning second phase. Throughout the area, hidden Valari fighters opened fire from concealed positions. They did not try to stand and fight. They fired a few shots, then moved to new positions before the Kreth could locate them. It was hit and run, over and over again. General Vortish tried to restore order, but his communication system was not working. Someone had sabotaged the main array during the night. He could not coordinate his troops or call for reinforcement from the ships above. For the first time in his long career, Vortish felt something unfamiliar. Feared that the battle lasted for 6 hours. By the end, the Kreth had lost nearly a third of their landing force. They had not captured anything. They had not even clearly seen the enemy they were fighting. They retreated to their dropships, only to discover that several vessels had been disabled by sabotage teams. During the fighting, Vortish escaped with what remained of his forces. As his ship lifted away from Valari Prime, he looked down at the planet with new eyes. Something had changed. The helpless victims he had expected to find were gone. In their place was something unexpected and dangerous. The news of the failed invasion spread quickly through the galaxy. The Galactic Council received reports with a mixture of relief and concern. The Valari had defended themselves, but the methods they had used troubled many representatives. Humans fight dirty, Delegate Yasharan complained during an emergency session. They use tricks and traps instead of honest combat. This is not how civilized species conduct warfare. The Valari were being exterminated, Ambassador Zelthan replied calmly. Should they have allowed it to continue simply to satisfy your ideas about proper behavior? High Arbiter Morith listened without comment. He had lived long enough to know that ideas about proper behavior usually came from species who had never faced extinction. On Valari Prime, there was celebration. For the first time in 300 years, the Kreth had been driven back. Families who had lived in constant fear finally felt hope. Children played in streets that had been empty for generations. Lisa Grant accepted the gratitude of the Valari people, but she did not celebrate. She knew this was only the beginning. The Kreth will return, she told her team that night. They have never been defeated like this before. Their pride will not allow them to let it stand. Next time, they will bring more ships and more soldiers. They will be more careful and more prepared. So what do we do? Kevin Brooks asked. Lisa looked at the star map on her wall. It showed Kreth territory, vast and powerful, surrounding the small Valari systems like a hungry predator circling wounded prey. We do not wait for them to come to us, she said quietly. We take the fight to them. The other advisors exchanged worried glances. Attacking the Kreth directly seemed like madness. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But they had learned to trust Lisa's judgment. The Kreth believe they are untouchable, Lisa continued. They have built their entire civilization on the idea that they are the strongest and that no one can threaten them. We are going to prove them wrong. She began outlining a plan that was bold, dangerous, and completely unexpected. It would require perfect timing and incredible courage. It would mean risking everything on a single desperate move. It was. In other words, a very human plan. Danny Cole listened and slowly began to smile. They will never see it coming, he said. That is the idea, Lisa replied. In warfare, the most dangerous weapon is not the biggest gun or the fastest ship. It is surprise. And we are about to give the Kreth the biggest surprise of their lives. The preparations began immediately. There was much work to do and very little time to do it. But for the first time since the war began, the Valari and their human allies were not just defending. They were attacking. And that made all the difference. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 100 different worlds. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few were made of light itself. They had gathered to discuss trade routes and mining rights, the usual boring matters that kept the galaxy running smoothly. But today, something unusual happened. Ambassador Zelthan of the Valari stepped forward. His people were known throughout the galaxy for their gentle nature. They had soft blue skin that changed color with their emotions, and they had never fought a war in their entire history. They were scientists, artists, and farmers. They believed that all problems could be solved through talking and understanding. But Zelthan's skin was gray today. Gray meant fear. Gray meant desperation. Honored members of the council, he began, his voice trembling slightly. My people are dying. For 300 years, the Kreth Dominion has raided our colonies. They take our resources. They destroy our cities. They kill our people without mercy. We have tried to negotiate. We have offered them everything they asked for. But they only want more. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone knew about the Kreth. They were a warrior species who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. They had conquered dozens of worlds and showed no signs of stopping. High Arbiter Morith, the oldest and wisest member of the council, leaned forward. He had lived for over 2,000 years and had seen empires rise and fall. Ambassador, the Council has expressed concern about the Kreth many times, but we cannot interfere in regional conflicts. It is against our most basic laws. I am not asking the Council to interfere, Zelfin replied. I am asking for permission to seek help elsewhere. From whom? Asked Delegate Yashrin of the Morthic Confederacy. Zelfin took a deep breath. From the humans of Earth. The hall erupted in whispers and worried murmurs. The humans had only been known to the galaxy for 60 years, but in that short time, they had made quite an impression. They were curious and friendly, but they were also strange. They had nearly destroyed their own planet with weapons of unimaginable power. They fought wars among themselves constantly. They were unpredictable in ways that made other species nervous. Ambassador, I must strongly advise against this, Mora said, his ancient face showing genuine concern. Humans are not like other species. They do not think the way we think. They do not fight the way we fight. Involving them in your conflict could lead to consequences none of us can predict. With respect, High Arbiter, my people have no other choice, Zelfin said. The Kreth have destroyed 14 of our colonies. Millions of my people are dead. We have no army. We have no weapons. We cannot defend ourselves. If the humans can help us, we must ask them. The Council debated for many hours. Some argued that the humans were too dangerous. Others pointed out that doing nothing meant allowing the Valari to be wiped out completely. In the end, they voted to allow Zelfin to contact Earth, but they added a formal warning to the galactic records. It was the first of many such warnings. On Earth, the message arrived at the United Earth Defense Coalition headquarters in Colorado. Commander Lisa Grant was reviewing routine reports when her aide, Lieutenant Kevin Brooks, rushed into her office. Ma'am, you need to see this, he said, placing a datapad on her desk. Lisa was 43 years old, with short gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 20 years in the military, serving in conflicts on 3 continents before humanity reached the stars. She had seen the best and worst of her species, and she had learned that most problems look different. Once you understood the people involved, she read the Valari message carefully. It described centuries of suffering. It described a peaceful people who had never hurt anyone being systematically destroyed by aggressive neighbors. It described children losing their parents and parents burying their children. And at the end, it asked a simple question. Would humanity help? They want military advisors, Kevin explained. Just advisors? They want us to teach them how to defend themselves. Lisa looked up at him. What do we know about the Kreth? Warrior culture, rigid military structure, superior technology and numbers. They have been expanding their territory for over 1,000 years, and no one has ever successfully stopped them. And the Valari? Pacifists. No military tradition at all. They have been trying to negotiate with the Kreth since the first raids, but the Kreth do not seem interested in talking. Lisa set down the datapad and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the mountains that surrounded the base. Earth had changed so much since first contact with alien life. Humanity had united in ways that once seemed impossible. Old enemies had become allies. Ancient conflicts had been set aside. But some things had not changed. There were still bullies in the universe, and there were still people who needed help. Prepare a transport, she said finally, and put together a team. 12 people, experienced in unconventional warfare. People who can think creatively and adapt to new situations. Kevin hesitated. The Galactic Council has expressed concerns about human involvement in this conflict. They think we might make things worse. Lisa turned to face him. The Council has had 300 years to do something about the Kreth. They chose to do nothing. Millions of Valari are dead. because the galaxy decided that following rules was more important than protecting innocent people. She picked up the datapad again and looked at the images attached to the message. Burned cities, mass graves, families torn apart. I joined the military because I wanted to protect people who could not protect themselves. That is what soldiers are supposed to do. If the council has a problem with that, they can file a complaint. 1 week later, a small human ship left Earth orbit and set course for Valari Prime. On board were 12 military advisors, each chosen for their experience and creativity. They brought with them weapons, training materials, and centuries of human military knowledge. None of them knew what they would find when they arrived. None of them could have predicted how their mission would change the galaxy. But all of them understood one simple truth. Somewhere in the universe, innocent people were suffering, and they had the ability to help. For Lisa Grant, that was reason enough. Ambassador Zelfin watched the human ship approach his world with emotions he could barely contain. His skin shifted through colors so quickly that his aides grew concerned. Fear, hope, gratitude, and uncertainty all mixed together. "Do you think they can really help us?" his assistant asked quietly. Zelfin did not answer immediately. He had studied everything he could find about humans. He had read their history, full of wars and violence, but also full of courage and sacrifice. He had learned about their strange habit of helping strangers for no apparent reason. He had seen recordings of humans risking their lives to save people they had never met. "I do not know if they can save us," he finally admitted. "But I know they will try. And right now, that is more than anyone else in the galaxy has offered." The ship landed gently on the platform. The door opened, and Commander Lisa Grant stepped out into the light of an alien sun. She looked around at the beautiful Valari city, at the people who had gathered to meet her, at the hope in their strange color-shifting faces. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Let us get to work." The Kreth Dominion was furious. General Vartash's failure had embarrassed the entire empire. The High Command gathered in their great war chamber, surrounded by the banners of 1,000 conquered worlds, and made their decision. They would send the largest fleet in Kreth history. 80 warships would become 150. They would not just raid Valari Prime, they would burn it to ash. They would kill every living thing on the surface. They would make an example so terrible that no one would ever dare resist the Dominion again. Kreth intelligence officers worked day and night to understand what had happened. They gathered every piece of information they could find about humans. What they learned made them uneasy. Humans had only been traveling among the stars for 200 years, but they had been fighting wars for thousands. Their history was filled with conflicts of every kind. They had developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had nearly wiped themselves out several times. And somehow, through all of it, they had survived and grown stronger. "They are dangerous," the intelligence chief reported to the High Command. "They do not fight according to any rules we understand. They use deception and surprise as their primary weapons. They attack from directions you do not expect. And they never, ever give up." The High Command listened, but was not worried. Humans were clever, yes, but they were few in number, and their technology was inferior to Kreth weapons. The massive fleet would overwhelm any tricks they might have. Lisa Grant received news of the approaching fleet through the network of listening posts she had established along the border. 150 warships. More firepower than the Valari had ever seen. More than enough to destroy the entire planet. She called a meeting with her team and the Valari leadership. Ambassador Zelfin's skin was the darkest gray she had ever seen. "We cannot defend against such a force," he said quietly. "Perhaps it is time to evacuate. Save as many of our people as we can. And go where?" Lisa asked. "The Kreth will follow you." They will hunt you across the galaxy until every Velari is dead. Running will only delay the inevitable. Then, what do you suggest? We have no ships that can match theirs. We have no weapons that can hurt them. Lisa smiled. It was a strange smile, the kind that soldiers sometimes have when they see a path forward that no one else can see. The Kreth have committed almost their entire military to this attack, she said. That means their home systems are nearly undefended. While they are coming here to destroy us, we are going to pay them a visit. The room fell silent. Even the other human advisors looked shocked. You want to attack the Kreth homeworld? Kevin Brooks asked slowly. I want to make them think we are attacking their homeworld, Lisa corrected. We do not need to conquer anything. We just need to scare them enough that they turn around. The plan was insane. It was desperate. It was exactly the kind of thing that no sensible species would ever attempt. It was perfect. Captain Maria Santos had been a test pilot before she became a ship commander. She was known for taking risks that terrified her colleagues and somehow always surviving. When Lisa explained the mission, Maria's eyes lit up with excitement. You want me to fly into Kreth space, past all their defenses, and threaten their capital while their entire fleet is somewhere else? She asked. Yes, Lisa replied. Maria grinned. When do we leave? The strike force was small. 3 human ships and 12 Velari vessels that had been converted from cargo haulers to improvised warships. They were not built for combat. They were not designed for what they were about to do. But they were all that was available. The journey to Kreth space required traveling through regions that most navigators considered impossible. Unstable areas filled with gravitational anomalies and radiation storms. The Kreth did not patrol these regions because they believed no one could survive passing through them. Humans had survived worse. Maria led her small fleet through the chaos, using techniques that her species had developed through years of desperate exploration. Ships shook and groaned. Systems failed and were repaired. Several times, it seemed certain that they would all be destroyed, but they made it through. The Kreth home system was beautiful in a harsh way. A red sun surrounded by heavily industrialized planets, shipyards building vessels of war, and defense stations that looked powerful but were designed for different threats. Maria opened a communication channel that broadcast to every receiver in the system. Attention, Kreth Dominion, she announced, her voice calm and steady. Your fleet is currently traveling to attack our allies. We thought it would be fair to return the visit. You have 1 hour to recall your forces. After that, we begin our campaign. Panic spread through the Kreth home system like fire through dry grass. The defensive forces scrambled to respond, but they were disorganized and unprepared. Maria's ships struck supply depots and communication relays, carefully avoiding civilian areas but causing maximum disruption. The message was clear. The Kreth were not untouchable. Their enemies could reach their most sacred places. Nothing was safe. General Vortish received the news when his fleet was still 2 days away from Velari Prime. At first, he did not believe it. Humans in Kreth space? Attacking the homeworld? It was impossible. But the reports kept coming. Fires burning in the orbital stations. Defense ships destroyed. The capital in a state of emergency. The High Command sent urgent orders. Forget the Velari. Return immediately. Protect the homeworld. Vortish had no choice but to obey. The massive fleet that was supposed to burn Velari Prime turned around and raced back toward home. By the time they arrived, Maria's strike force had long since disappeared back into the unstable regions they had come from. The Velari were saved. But more importantly, something fundamental had changed. The Kreth had believed themselves invincible. They had built their entire society on the certainty that they were the strongest, that no one could challenge them. In a single day, that certainty had been shattered. The Galactic Council received news of the Santiago raid with a mixture of amazement and alarm. No one had ever attacked the Kreth homeworld before. No one had even tried. The humans had done it with a handful of ships and somehow escaped without losing a single vessel. "This is unprecedented," High Arbiter Morath said during the emergency session. "The humans have demonstrated capabilities we did not know they possessed. They have changed the balance of power in this region. They have started a war," Delegate Yashran argued. "The Kreth will not forgive this insult. This conflict will continue until one side is completely destroyed." Ambassador Zelfin stood to speak. His skin was blue now, the color of hope. "The humans did what we could not do. They showed the Kreth that aggression has consequences. Perhaps now the Dominion will be willing to negotiate." The debate continued for hours, but one thing was clear to everyone present. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. On the small ship returning to Valari Prime, Maria Santa sat in the captain's chair and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done the impossible. They had walked into the heart of an empire and walked out again. "Do you think it worked?" her first officer asked. Maria looked out at the stars passing by. Somewhere behind them, the Kreth were dealing with the consequences of their arrogance. Somewhere ahead, the Valari were celebrating their survival. "It worked for today," she replied. "Tomorrow, we will see what comes next." That is how it always is with war. You win one battle and immediately start preparing for the next. She smiled, thinking about the look on General Vortash's face when he learned what had happened. But today was a good day. Today, we reminded the galaxy that size and strength are not everything. Sometimes the ones who seem weak turn out to be the most dangerous of all. The ship continued on its journey, carrying its crew back to allies who were waiting with gratitude and relief. The war was not over. But for the first time, victory seemed possible, and that was enough to keep fighting. 20 years passed after the war ended. The galaxy changed in ways that no one had predicted. The Valari flourished in the peace that followed. They rebuilt their destroyed colonies and established new ones. They created a small defense force, nothing compared to the great military powers of the galaxy, but enough to protect themselves from minor threats. They never forgot what the humans had done for them, and they taught their children to remember as well. Ambassador Zelfin lived long enough to see his grandchildren grow up in a world without fear. He wrote books about the human intervention that became required reading in schools across a dozen worlds. When he finally passed away at the age of 230, millions mourned him as a hero who had saved his people. The Kreth Dominion changed in unexpected ways. The generation that had known the war grew old and passed on, replaced by young Kreth who had only heard stories about the humans who had humiliated their empire. Some of these young ones hated humanity with a burning passion, but others were curious. They wondered what made humans so effective. They studied human history and culture, trying to understand. General Vortish retired from military service and spent his final years giving interviews about his experiences. His perspective had evolved significantly over the decades. "We believed that strength was the only thing that mattered," he said in one of his last public appearances. "We measured ourselves by the territory we controlled and the enemies we had crushed. The humans showed us that true strength is more complicated than we thought." He paused, his old scales now almost white with age. "They were not stronger than us. Their ships were not better than ours. But they understood something we did not. They understood that winning a battle is not the same as winning a war. They understood that making enemies is easy, but making peace requires courage." When Vortish died, some Kreth celebrated the passing of an old fool who had brought shame to the Empire. But others quietly honored him as someone who had learned wisdom the hard way. The Galactic Council spent years debating what to do about humanity. Some members wanted to restrict human expansion, fearing that such an unpredictable species might destabilize the careful balance of power that had existed for millennia. Others argued that humans should be embraced as valuable allies against future threats. In the end, High Arbiter Morath proposed a compromise. Humanity would be allowed to continue growing and developing, but the Council would add a formal warning to the galactic records. This warning would be shared with any species considering involvement with humans. The warning was carefully worded after extensive debate. It read, "Species considering alliance with or opposition to humanity should understand the following characteristics of human behavior. First, humans form strong attachments to their allies and will take significant risks to protect them. Second, humans do not follow predictable patterns and will employ unexpected tactics when normal approaches fail. Third, humans learn from both victories and defeats with remarkable speed. Fourth, humans are capable of extreme violence but prefer peaceful solutions when possible. Fifth, and most importantly, humans should never be underestimated based on their relatively recent appearance on the galactic stage." The warning concluded with a simple statement that would prove remarkably accurate over the following centuries. Never involve humans in your disputes unless you are prepared for outcomes you cannot predict or control. Morath lived for another 300 years after the warning was issued. He watched humanity continue to grow and change, integrating into galactic society in ways that sometimes delighted him and sometimes worried him. They were chaotic. They were contradictory. They could be incredibly kind and incredibly cruel, sometimes within the same day. But they were also brave. They rushed toward danger when others fled. They defended strangers for no reward. They built friendships with species so different from themselves that communication should have been impossible. In his final address to the Council before his death, Morath offered his own thoughts on humanity's place in the galaxy. "We have spent thousands of years building systems of order and stability," he said. "We have created rules and traditions designed to prevent conflict and maintain peace. The humans remind us that order without justice is merely another form of tyranny. They challenge us to be better than we are, not through lectures or demands, but through the simple example of their actions." He paused, his ancient face showing something that might have been a smile. "They are exhausting. They are dangerous. They are impossible to predict. And I believe they may be exactly what this galaxy needed." The council chamber fell silent as the old arbiter departed for the last time. His words would be remembered and repeated for generations. Commander Lisa Grant returned to Earth and retired from military service. She became a teacher at the United Earth Defense Academy, training the next generation of soldiers and diplomats. Their students came from dozens of species, all eager to learn from the woman who had changed galactic history. She stayed in contact with many of the people she had met during the war. Maria Santos commanded larger and larger ships until she too retired, spending her final years writing stories about her adventures that children across the galaxy loved to read. Kevin Brooks became a general and eventually the head of the entire Earth Defense Coalition. Danny Cole returned to his farm in Nebraska and grew vegetables for the rest of his life, rarely speaking about what he had done but occasionally smiling at secret memories. One day, many years after the war ended, Lisa received a message from Valari Prime. It was from Zelthan's granddaughter, a young woman named Alara. She had applied to the Earth Defense Academy and wanted Lisa to write a letter supporting her application. Lisa sat in her garden, reading the message as the sun set over the mountains. The young Valari had written about why she wanted to serve, about how the stories of human courage had inspired her, about how she wanted to help others the way her people had been helped. Lisa smiled and began writing her response. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was changing with it. Old enemies were becoming friends. New challenges were appearing every day. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but some things remained constant. There would always be people who needed help. There would always be bullies who preyed on the weak. And there would always be those who stood up and said, "Not today. Not while I am here." That was what it meant to be human, Lisa thought. Not the ships or the weapons or the tactics. The willingness to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. The refusal to look away when injustice was being done. The stubborn, irrational belief that one person could make a difference. She finished her letter and sent it across the stars to a young Valari who dreamed of following in human footsteps. Then she went inside to make dinner, as the first stars appeared in the evening sky. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the warning about humans was being read by species who had never met one. Some would ignore it. Some would take it seriously. Some would test humanity's strength and discover what the Kreth had discovered. But for now, on a small planet called Earth, an old soldier enjoyed her retirement and remembered the friends she had made among the stars. The war was over. Peace had held. And the galaxy was just a little bit better than it had been before. That, she decided, was enough. The end. Something amazing happened after the Santiago raid. The Kreth Dominion, the most feared military power in the region, requested mediation from the Galactic Council. In their entire 1,000-year history, they had never asked for outside help in any conflict. They had always imposed their will, through force, but the humans had shown them that force alone was not enough. The mediation conference was held on a neutral space station far from both Valari and Kreth territory. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness what everyone agreed was a historic moment. The galaxy was watching. Commander Lisa Grant represented humanity at the negotiations. She arrived with only Lieutenant Kevin Brooks at her side. She wore a simple uniform without medals or decorations. She carried no visible weapons. The Kreth delegation was much larger. General Vordish himself led 12 senior officers, all dressed in their finest military regalia. They looked powerful and intimidating, which was exactly the impression they wanted to create. High Arbiter Morath presided over the conference. He sat at the head of a long table, with the humans on one side and the Kreth on the other. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "This mediation has been requested by the Kreth Dominion," Morath began. "We are here to discuss a possible end to hostilities between the Dominion and the Valari people, as well as their human allies." Vordish stood immediately. He was older now, his scales dulled by age, but his eyes still burned with the fire of a warrior. "We are here because the humans fight without honor," he declared. "They hide in shadows. They use tricks and deception. They attacked our homeworld while our fleet was elsewhere. These are not the actions of civilized beings." Lisa remained seated, her expression calm. "General, your fleet was traveling to burn an entire planet and kill millions of innocent people. We stopped you. I am sorry if our methods offended your sense of proper behavior." "Proper behavior?" Vordish slammed his fist on the table. "You know nothing of proper behavior. The Kreth have conquered worlds for 1,000 years. We are warriors. We face our enemies directly, with courage and strength." "You faced the Valari directly," Lisa replied quietly. "They had no weapons. They had no army. They tried to negotiate with you for 300 years. You killed them anyway. Is that what you call courage?" The room fell silent. Vordish opened his mouth to respond, but found he had nothing to say. Lisa stood slowly and walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of the general. She was shorter than him by nearly a foot, but somehow she seemed to fill the entire room. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said. "We have done terrible things in our history. We have fought wars over land, over religion, over ideas. We have killed millions of our own people. We nearly destroyed our own planet." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we have also learned. We have learned that true strength is not about conquering the weak. It is about protecting them. We have learned that honor is not about following rules. It is about doing what is right, even when it is hard." She looked directly into Vartash's eyes. "The Valari asked us for help because they had no one else to turn to. The galaxy watched them suffer for 3 centuries and did nothing. We came because we believe that allowing injustice to continue is the same as committing injustice ourselves." Morith watched this exchange with fascination. In 2,000 years, he had seen many negotiations. He had watched empires bargain for peace and planets trade hands like playing cards. But he had never seen anything quite like this. The human commander was not threatening the Kreth general. She was not trying to intimidate him with displays of power. She was simply telling him the truth and trusting that the truth would be enough. And somehow, against all expectations, it seemed to be working. The negotiations continued for 3 days. There were arguments and accusations, moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But slowly, carefully, an agreement began to take shape. The Kreth would return 11 of the 14 Valari colonies they had conquered. They would pay compensation for the destruction they had caused. They would sign a permanent treaty promising to never attack the Valari again. In exchange, the humans would withdraw their military advisors from Valari Prime. They would not establish a permanent military presence in the region. The conflict would end, and both sides would have peace. On the final day, Vortish signed the agreement with obvious reluctance. His hand shook slightly as he pressed his seal into the document. For a warrior who had never known defeat, accepting these terms felt like surrendering a part of himself. As the ceremony concluded, he approached Lisa one last time. "This is not over," he said quietly, so that only she could hear. "The Dominion has a long memory. We do not forget those who humiliate us." Lisa met his gaze without flinching. "Neither do we, General. But I hope you will remember something else. We did not come here looking for enemies. We came to help people who were suffering. Everything that happened was a response to your aggression, not the cause of it." She took a step closer. "The Valari never wanted to fight. All they wanted was to live in peace. If you had simply left them alone, none of this would have happened. Think about that the next time your leaders consider starting a war." Vortish said nothing, but something in his expression changed. For just a moment, the fire in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something that might have been doubt. The human advisors left Valari Prime as agreed. Ambassador Zelthan organized a farewell ceremony that was broadcast across the planet. Millions of Valari watched as the people who had saved them prepared to depart. "How can we ever thank you?" Zelthan asked Lisa privately, away from the cameras and crowds. "You do not need to thank us," she replied. "Just remember what happened here. Remember that you are not helpless. Remember that you have the strength to defend yourselves if you choose to use it." She looked out at the Valari sunset, watching the colors paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. "And remember that you are not alone. The galaxy is full of species who believe that might makes right. But there are others who believe differently. Find them, support them. Build alliances based on shared values instead of shared enemies." Zelthan's skin shifted through a rainbow of colors as he processed her words. "Will we ever see you again?" Lisa smiled. "The universe is a big place, Ambassador. Our paths may cross again someday. Until then, take care of your people. That is the most important thing any leader can do." The human ship lifted off from Valari Prime and rose into the stars. Lisa watched the planet grow smaller through the viewport, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. They had accomplished what they came to do. The Valari were safe. The craft had been humbled. Peace had been achieved, but she knew the peace was fragile. It required constant work to maintain. The craft might honor the treaty, or they might not. Other threats might emerge. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and safety was never guaranteed. Kevin Brooks joined her at the viewport. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. "I do not know," Lisa admitted. "But I think we gave them a chance. That is all anyone can do. Give people the chance to build something better, and hope they take it." She turned away from the window and headed toward the bridge. There was work to be done, reports to file, plans to make. The mission was over, but life went on. "Come on," she said to Kevin. "Let us go home." The ship accelerated toward Earth, carrying its crew back to a world that had barely noticed they were gone. Behind them, the Valari began the long process of rebuilding their society. And across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered what this strange species called humanity would do next. The answer, of course, was whatever needed to be done.